If you're listening to a 40, 50, 60-year-old guru, visionary, thought leader, and this person is saying, yeah, I found my passion and it was empowering people to lead a productive life, and say, you can be remarkable. Now, everybody, put your hands together because we're all going to be remarkable. I think that's total bullshit.
Let's go.
Guy Kawasaki didn't invent evangelism, but he certainly popularized it as the chief evangelist at Apple. And that was back before it broke through into the mainstream as a cultural phenomenon. He is currently the chief evangelist at Canva, which is an online graphics design company, which if you haven't checked it out, even people who are not graphically inclined can do. It's based out of Australia. He is also the author of 15 books, including his latest book, Think Remarkable, which we are going to be getting into. It distills the insights that he's gleaned from interviewing over 200 remarkable people on his very successful podcast called, you guessed it, Remarkable People. Guy Kawasaki, welcome to This Magic Life.
Thank you. So just to set the record straight, first there was Jesus, and then there was a 2,000-year gap. So I hardly invented evangelism. I was Apple's second software evangelist. But
Awesome.
2,000 years here, 2,000 years there, pretty soon a lot of time goes by.
Absolutely. And you need to remind people again.
That's true.
And, it's worked for you. It's gotten you two good jobs. And actually, a few others along the way. Not bad for a little boy who grew up on what some might have described as the other side of the tracks
Yes.
back in Honolulu.
Talk about Steve Jobs, and you can't connect the dots unless you're looking backwards, right? So let me quickly connect some dots for you. So I was, as you say, I was from a sort of lower middle class part of Honolulu. And I was in the public school system, and a sixth grade teacher convinced my parents that they should take me out of the public school system, put me in a private school system, because I had the potential to go to college. So thank you, God, that, my parents listened to her and they made the sacrifices to make this possible. So I grew up and I was catching the bus from where I lived to the other side of town to this school called Iolani. And twice in my background, I was robbed on the bus, hijacked of my lunch money. And another story is in my high school years, I don't know the connection. I don't remember the connection anymore, but somebody gave me a ride in his Porsche 911. Okay. So now I loved cars. And, some people talk about they want to change the world. They want to change climate. They want to change, poverty or fresh water or disease. I didn't want to change the world. I just wanted to change the car. Okay. So now I get to Stanford and I meet this guy. And the difference between me and Mike Boych is that he too loved cars, but he had the cars. I just lost it after them. So I as college often happens, you go home with your roommates, for Thanksgiving or Easter or whatever. And I go to Phoenix with him, and his father picks us up in a Rolls Royce, and my head is exploding, right? You come from the wrong part of town, and now you're riding a Rolls Royce in Phoenix, and we go to his house. His backyard is the golf course of the Arizona Biltmore. So my head is fully exploded.
Yeah.
We go out to dinner and his mother is tired. So she asked me to drive her home in her car, and her car is a Ferrari Daytona. So now I'm telling you this whole story about serendipity because the fact that I loved cars made me become friends with Mike Boych. And years later, Mike Boych hired me as the second software evangelist at Apple. And when he hired me, I had a degree in psychology, which was the easiest major I could find at Stanford. And I fundamentally had a background in the jewelry manufacturing business, not tech. So I had no background, work or educational. But I was friends with Mike Boych, and I was friends with Mike Boych because we shared a love of cars. So now I don't want you parents listening to think, oh, I got to tell my kids to love German, Italian cars because that's going to set them up for their career. I can't tell you that that was a career plan, but
Right.
that's serendipity.
Yeah. Could you have ever suspected that your shared love of cars would change the course of your
No,
career trajectory?
but I don't want you to think I was that cerebral in high school thinking like that. So that would be a wrong impression. I just loved cars. I love cars to this day. And, but there's several lessons to take from this, serious lessons. So lesson number one is that, I don't think people should sweat the source of their motivation. I think what's more important is that you are motivated. So I happen to be motivated by a love of cars and a desire to live someplace where I wouldn't get robbed on the bus. All right. So that was the source of my motivation. It wasn't anything highbrow or, as I said, changing the world. But I came to a conclusion pretty early. If you want a nice car, you better study hard and work hard. And in the end, those attitudes just helped me become successful. But it started with not being robbed and wanting an expensive car.
So, why do you think Mike reached out to you? You were selling jewelry to say, "Hey, guy, I've got the job for you, and it's called
Well,
evangelism."
we'd have to ask him that, but
You
I
never
mean,
did?
no, but I mean, clearly we were good friends, and I guess he thought I had some kind of, good smile and outgoing personality because evangelism back then was convincing software companies to write software for a computer that didn't exist. So it was, more or less hand to hand combat. It really wasn't, when people think of sales today, they think, oh, it's like A/B testing of your homepage. Should that link be blue or should it be green or should it be yellow? What's the A/B results? But back then, evangelism, and then previous to that, selling in the jewelry manufacturing business, that was hand to hand combat. That was the best training I ever had for the rest of my life.
I mean, it sounds like what we would refer to as sales.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sales is vastly underappreciated, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, people tend to define it too narrowly. That they think of a used car salesman or somebody trying to hustle you, vitamins or I don't know, some multi-level marketing thing. But I'm telling you, sales is convincing your kids to clean their room. Sales is convincing the flight attendant to upgrade you to first class. Sales is, it's convincing your boss to give you a raise or let you work remotely. All of that is sales.
Yes. So, how much of what you're doing today, Guy, as a successful podcaster, author, and chief evangelist at Canva, lines up in any way, shape, or form with what you thought your life was going to look like when you were back at Stanford majoring in psychology?
It- Is it possible to give you a negative number? I mean,
Sure.
it's near zero or negative. Now, honestly, when I went to Stanford from Hawaii, and in Hawaii back then, the career path for someone successful would be you manage the Hilton Hawaiian Village, or you manage Liberty House at Ala Moana Shopping Center, or you work for Dole Pineapple, or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And because Hawaii was tourism and agriculture. And then I come to the mainland and like, oh my God, this is a whole new world. I mean, people are creating the Hewletts and the Packards and the Intels and Apple and all these software companies, and there's tens of thousands of employees, and there's public offerings, and like it was magic. I mean, I fell in love with technology, and I have never looked back.
So, what was your first job after you graduated? And do you remember how you got it, Guy?
Well, during the summers of my college years, I worked as a truck driver's helper. So I worked for a company in Hawaii that delivered the prefabricated materials for building houses. So the truck had to drop off, the redwood and the 2x4s and the concrete and all that. So I helped unload trucks. Now, uh, after college, really, my first job was when I was getting my MBA. I went to work for this jewelry company, literally counting diamonds. And after
How
I
did you get
graduated,
it?
I got it because I'm from Hawaii, and some of my classmates at Stanford had another friend from Hawaii, and she happened to be working at the jewelry company. So it's not like I had the right background for counting diamonds either, because I had a gemological degree. I mean,
Right. So
yeah.
that was another example
I
of
I,
the
I
magic.
am I am just a poster child for serendipity. I'm a lucky guy.
Well, let's talk about that because in Think Remarkable, you do talk about how grads should follow their interests
Yes.
and not their passions. And I love when you wrote that every time some guru talks about following your passion, talking to new grads, you throw up a little in your mouth.
Well, I mean, that is a particularly graphic way to say it, but yes. And
Yes.
if you're listening to a 40, 50, 60-year-old guru, visionary, thought leader, and this person is saying, yeah, I found my passion and it was empowering people to lead a productive life. And, now everybody stand up and look to the person on your right and say, you can be remarkable. And look to the person on your left and say, you can be remarkable. Now, everybody, put your hands together because we're all going to be remarkable. Yeah,
Woo! Yeah.
I think that's total bullshit. So, and these people, they say, yeah, I found my passion, helping people find their passion. Well, I mean, they don't remember the first 35 years of their life where they had no idea and they were bouncing around and, that they couldn't keep a job because I don't know what. And
Exactly.
yeah, but then now they found their passion. And so they're telling 18-year-old kids, you got to find your passion. And I think we do a major disservice to kids when we give them the expectation and the sort of requirement that you need to find your passion. What's wrong? You're like 18 years old. You haven't started a company yet. You haven't created a foundation to bring fresh water to people in Africa. You're not even nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize yet. How are you going to write your college essay? Oh my God, you got to get your act together, right? And this word passion implies that it's like love at first sight, and you find it, you love it, you're good at it, and you live happily ever after until you become a guru telling people to find their passion. But I think life is very different from that if you are conscious and your eyes are open and your ears are open and you have a growth mindset, that you're willing to try new things and embrace vulnerability, that you'll come across many things that you find interesting. Could be surfing, could be photography, could be physics, could be, God help you, calculus, could be violin. And what you need to do, particularly when you're young, is you need to do a lot of sampling, because you really don't know what you will love until you do a lot of sampling. And I think a very good metaphor for this is dating, which is to say that, if you're a parent and you say to your 20-year-old kid, why haven't you met the man or woman of your dreams yet? You're 20, for crying out loud. You should have found your passion by now. Your mother and I were married after high school. So what's wrong with you? Well, I mean, maybe your kids should do some more sampling before they figure out, who to spend the rest of their life with. So I think you should pursue your interests.
So,
Now,
how old were you when you met your wife?
let's see. We've been married since '86. So in '86, I was 54, 32 years old.
Okay. Yeah. So you as they say, kissed a few frogs over the years.
Don't ask, don't tell.
So, Guy, you mentioned you've got 4 kids, and
Yes.
actually 2 of them are, I guess, college age.
Well, 2
What
graduated
Oh,
and
2
one is in
graduated.
college.
1 is in college. What advice do you have for other parents, and I'm a parent with a first-year student, who are also understandably anxious, maybe even a little bit afraid about whether or not their young adult is gonna be able to find a job when they graduate?
Well, listen, this is why it's easier to be the author and the guest than the parent, okay? And everything I'm about to tell you, I don't want you to believe that I have successfully pulled off, okay? But, um, with hindsight, uh, I try to encourage our kids to travel as much as they can. And, this is college may be the last time in your life that you can travel unfettered with mortgages and car payments and kids and all that. So, one of my regrets in life is that when I was at Stanford, I was such a good Asian American that I wanted to take a heavy load and graduate fast so that, I could spend the rest of my life working for total bozos, right? So with hindsight, I wish I had gone to Stanford in Japan and Stanford in Italy and, Stanford in Croatia. I never did any of that. And, now that I'm 69 years old, I guess I could do it, but it's a little late. And
It's not late.
yeah.
I disagree with you, Guy. You are a young man. You're gonna live to be over 100. And
Oh,
by the way, this guy is surfing, and he only started surfing when he was 60.
and I'm going to surf right after this. Um, so I think as a parent, I'll tell you another story. So about 20 years ago, I gave the baccalaureate address for Palo Alto High School. And I gave them a top 10. All my speeches are top 10s. And the number one recommendation I gave to the graduating class of, I don't know, 2000 or whatever, was that you should live off your parents as long as you can. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and say, yeah, I was a senior back then and I heard you say that. And so, yeah, I've been living off my parents as long as I can. And they hate you, Guy. And,
Yeah, they're all clicking off right now.
right, right. They're saying, I will never buy that book.
Never.
I'm going to buy Elon Musk's autobiography for my kids. I don't want them to listen to Guy. So I think that to the extent possible, you should stretch out college as long as you can. I mean, it is just a great time. Now, you also asked, what about the job? Well, listen, if you're 18 or 19 right now, you're probably going to be, you can be working till you're 90 or 95, right? So you got another, I don't know, 60, 70 years to figure it out. So I kind of would think you can chillax about your first few jobs because you're probably going to have 10 or 15 jobs over the course of your career. And maybe it was different back in the 50s and 60s, 19, not 18, that, you graduate from college, you enter the IBM trainee program, then you stay at IBM for 30 years, you retire, and that's it.
You
But
get a watch.
that's not how the world works anymore, right? So, let's this concept of the perfect first job, I ask you to revisit it so I could make the case. Let's take a nightmare scenario, right? So, you have a kid, that kid is, I don't know, chemistry major or whatever, and graduates college, and he or she gets what you think is, oh my God, this is the best job for my kid. He is going to, or she is going to work as an engineer at Theranos. Oh my God. He or she got a job at Theranos, and it's led by Elizabeth Holmes, who's on the cover of Fortune and Forbes, and the board of directors is 2, secretaries of state, and they got all these famous venture capitalists, and they're saying that with a drop of blood, we can make this diagnosis of all these diseases, and CVS is going to have it, Walgreens is going to have it, Kaiser is going to have it. This is going to be like the the biggest thing since Google, and my kid just got a job there. And then fast forward 3 years and Elizabeth Holmes is in jail. The whole thing was a fraud. And like, oh my God, my kid's life is ruined. On his LinkedIn profile, it says he worked for Theranos from 2 years until it dissolved. Okay, so that's like your worst nightmare, right? And I would make the case that that might be the most valuable learning experience of your life, because you're going to learn how deception occurs. You're going to learn how wishful thinking occurs. You're going to learn how lying occurs, and you're going to see the slippery slope from making a promise to lying about it. And you're also going to see that seemingly intelligent people, seeming experts, they are often fooled just as anybody else, right? So they had the most incredible board of directors in the history of mankind, right? And every one of them was fooled. Every stinking one of them believed that the Theranos technology works. So if you were on the inside of Theranos, I think you look at that and say, you know what? I'm not going to default to just looking at the window dressing and seeing that if they have a famous person, it must be good. I mean, if Tom Brady endorses this new treatment for COVID, maybe you should think about whether Tom Brady knows, not to pick on Tom Brady, but, LeBron James, or I don't know, Martina Navratilova, you pick a name, right? So you need to think about, does expertise in one area transfer to another area? This person, this famous person endorses cryptocurrency. Oh, must be a good thing, right?
What do they know about crypto? Right? Like, ask those questions. Guy, I love that example so much. And honestly, it is why this show is called This Magic Life rather than Surf Serendipity, which may be the title of my book. But it's called magic because serendipity always has a positive connotation.
Yes.
And the kinds of shit, the good and the bad, that happen in our life, it's like sometimes it's fairy dust magic and other times it's black magic. It's going to work for a Theranos and having the place shut down because the woman is a fraud. It's the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's getting fired. It's getting sick. And at the time, it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
But if you keep pushing through the shit, you will get to the other side and it will have brought you, transported or teleported you
Well,
to an even better place. I don't know if you agree with that.
I absolutely agree. Now, this is not to say that you should go look for shit, right? But I'm saying even without looking for shit, shit's going to find
comes.
you, right?
Oh yeah, it will. It will.
Listen, if taking this worst case, if you were working at Theranos, and I interviewed the whistleblower of Theranos, right?
Tyler Schultz.
Yeah, he blew the whistle. And now I think he's stronger than ever. Now, if I had worked for Theranos and it blew up like this, first of all, you can't hide it. You have to put it on your profile because it will come out. And if I were interviewing as that person, I would say, listen, you're going to obviously see that I worked at Theranos. And let me tell you something that was a very valuable experience. Let me tell you what I learned. I learned to be honest. I learned to not trust in other people's, word or other people's expertise. Just because they're expertise in something doesn't mean it transfers. I learned so many lessons that I will be a very valuable employee for you. The opposite of success is not failure. The opposite of success is learning. Learning. That's the key. Now, if you make it a failure, you make it a failure. But I think that's a learning opportunity. And
absolutely.
I kind of related to this topic is that I am deaf. Okay. So now let's just say that you would not rank deafness as a desirable quality to be a podcaster. Okay. Let's just say.
Sure. It's tough.
Now, yeah. I happen to be able to do this interview because of technology called a cochlear implant. But there was a time where prior to my cochlear implant, I really struggled to do podcasting because I'd have to depend on Chrome's real-time transcription, and Chrome's real-time transcription isn't that great. And I remember I was interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I was trying to use the Chrome transcription. And so if just interviewing a normal person with Chrome transcription is hard enough. But when you are interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist, with IQ, I don't know, 400 or whatever it is, it's not that easy to keep up with Neil deGrasse Tyson, even if you have perfect hearing and a perfect brain. And, but that's again, it's like serendipity. So, my deafness has forced me to change how I podcast and change how I do things. But at the end of the day, I could fall back and say, listen, I lost my hearing, so I quit podcasting. Or you can get a cochlear implant and keep going forward. And that's what I chose to do.
What a beautiful spirit and way to turn such a challenging handicap into something that you can live with and live a very full life with.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll give you a better example of how to look at life as half full. So
Yes.
I interviewed someone named Halim Flowers. And at 16, he was sentenced to over 40 years for being accessory to a murder. And when he served 22 years, Maryland changed their law, something along the lines that if you're a minor and you've served at least 16 years, we're going to let you out early, because we figured that, when you were arrested and when you're convicted at 16, you probably, weren't fully formed as a human being, and, your judgment was poor, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so he gets out, and now he is just a world famous painter and author. And he acquired those skills while in prison. And so, look him up. His name is Halim Flowers, like, bouquet, flowers. And many people think that he's the next Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I look at that, I say, so Guy, you're overcoming deafness. Halim had to overcome 22 years of federal imprisonment. Like, who's had the tougher life, Guy? You or Halim? And now, I mean, I guess you could look at it the other way, like people who are not deaf, perfectly healthy, great surfers, rich, famous, all that. I guess you could be envious of them, but I am not.
But you do talk about in the book how to use envy
Yes.
to inspire you and to
Yes.
push you,
Okay.
which is a good, twist on that.
I can tell you with total certainty, I envied people with German cars. Okay. Stanford had this, parents' weekend, and this parents' weekend, lots of California Stanford students, their parents would drive in. And oh my God, the first time that happened, I looked out at that parking lot. It's full of Ferraris and Porsches, and one of my classmates' father was a very famous cardiologist from LA, and he pulls up in his 275 GT Ferrari, and I got a ride in it. And I can honestly tell you, the only emotion I can use to describe that was envy. All caps with exclamation point. And that's another, like, one of those moments that, Guy, this is why you're at Stanford. This is why you're going to study. This is why you're going to work hard, because someday you're going to buy yourself a Ferrari.
And have you?
No, I haven't. But
I want to go back to the relationship piece of your story, because you did mention Mike again. And in Think Remarkable, you encourage your readers to build random connections.
Yes.
Something that you have done in your 60s while you're surfing. That's how you found your podcast producer and your co-author, Madison Newsmer. But it is random connections that you're highlighting.
Well-
what are those random connections, and what are the qualities that can help attract them?
One of the lessons that I learned about random connections and serendipity is this. So I interviewed Andrew Zimmern. Andrew Zimmern is a guy who does bizarre foods, and, goes around the world and he eats, like, I don't know, rotten sharks and, teriyaki guinea pigs and whatever he eats all over the world. And he told me that as a young kid, he had trouble with substance abuse, and At 30, he became the world's oldest intern, and he had actually 3 positions at once. One was a Minnesota TV station, okay? And he said, Guy, somebody pulled me aside one day and he gave me this advice, which is the best advice I've had, which is you got to make yourself indispensable. So I tell my kids that, and I hope all of you listening, you tell your kids that you know what, you want to succeed in life, you want to make a difference, you want to be remarkable. The test is, can you make yourself indispensable? It could be indispensable to your part-time job, to the music library at your high school. It could be, to truck driver's helper. You make yourself indispensable. So the next question, of course, is, well, how do I make myself indispensable? And I'll tell you something, 80% of it is you just freaking show up. You just keep showing up, because many people do not keep showing up. So that's 80% of it. And the other 20% of it is you do the shit work that nobody else wants to do. And so Andrew, he tells this story that, I was at the TV station and the GM says, okay, we got to lay cable. Who can help? Andrew raises his hand. Then he says, we got to do lighting for this interview. Andrew raises his hand. And then he says, well, we got like hours of video to edit. And Andrew, not knowing anything about editing video, raises his hand. So when you become indispensable, guess what? You get paid more, you get more opportunities, you have more serendipitous connections, and life becomes good. You are paving the way for your success. So now, I think a lot of people, we have this impression that Gen Z and whatever is after Gen Z, they're all concerned about life-work balance. And in my humble opinion, that concept is a little overrated. To think that you can thread this needle and have a great life and great work. I believe in Santa Claus too, but there are times in your life that you just have to sacrifice. No two ways about it. And so I think, our kids have to understand that you got to pay the price. And, listen, God bless you. Maybe you can pull off, you'll find a large company and they'll let you work remotely from Bali and Cancun and Croatia and, whatever. But I'm telling you that life is not working remote for 3 hours a day and, life is perfect.
What can our listeners and viewers do right now, Guy, to become more magical, to experience more serendipity in their lives?
I think that the most important thing is to embrace the growth mindset. The growth mindset means that you believe you can learn new skills, you can learn new things, you can be a better person, as opposed to the fixed mindset, which believes that you cannot do those things or that you're already perfect, so there's no reason to fix yourself, right? And so I think that is the most important thing. And I tell you, after I've interviewed hundreds of people who are remarkable, they all had a growth mindset. So the book is divided into 3 pieces: growth, grit, and grace. Because that's my observation, that remarkable people, they have a growth phase, then they work their butts off in the grit phase. And the last part of their life, they realize that I need to have grace and graciousness and pay back the world for all my good fortune.
Mm. Well, you have all 3, and especially the third, because you have made so much time for me. I have just one final question for you. Looking back on your incredibly successful career, what do you think has been the secret to the magic and the serendipity that you've experienced in your life?
Um, well, at one level, the best explanation is just blind, dumb shit luck. So, I think many people underestimate the role of luck. And let's face it, Guy being born in Hawaii, Guy having this 6th grade teacher convince his parents to put him into a private school, Guy having his parents listening to her and making the sacrifice, Guy getting into Stanford, Guy meeting Mike Boych, Guy working for the Macintosh division. Like, in a sense, I hit the jackpot several times, right? And, like, I could have been born in living in the Gaza Strip, or I could be in Syria, or, who knows where I could be, right? Like, how did I come to deserve being born in Hawaii and having all this line up for me? So I think a lot of it is luck. Now, the flip side for me is that I have been very lucky, but I love to work. I am Angela Duckworth's poster child for grit, man. I just love to work. I don't mind work. I do 3 or 4 of these a day right now. I recorded a speech today. I mean, I love to work. I can outwork most people.
And you have great energy and a beautiful smile that you also talk about in the book. Not that you're patting yourself on the back, but as part of the formula to attract those wonderful serendipitous conversations, the random connections that you would make. Guy's book is called Think Remarkable. It is fantastic. I've read it cover to cover, and his podcast is also called Remarkable People, one of whom you, or which of whom you certainly are, Guy. I want to wish
you flatter me,
Oh, no, it is true. It is true. And I want to wish you and your family, your 4 kids, and your partner many, many more
Thank you.
magical moments to come.
Let's go.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of This Magic Life. Our mission is to inspire you to stop fearing your future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await you. Make sure to subscribe to This Magic Life on YouTube so you don't miss any new episodes. And for on-the-go listening, give us a follow wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We absolutely love to get feedback from the This Magic Life community, so make sure to drop us a comment on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple. And you can always find me on LinkedIn at Andrea Koppel, aka the Career Magic Maker. I can't wait to see you soon.